Imagine a 7-year-old girl, her hair tangled from the rain, holding a baby tightly, wrapped in a thin blanket, both of them shivering with cold right in the middle of the wet sidewalk. Her name is Lúcia. She lost her mother not long ago, and since then, she's been tossed onto the downtown streets, trying desperately to find something to eat, just enough so she and her little brother can survive another day. That night, cars drive by, people avert their gaze, until Lúcia gathers the courage to ask for help for the 1000th time. But this time, she chooses luxury, right at the door of a crowded, high-end restaurant. Out of nowhere, she finds herself face to face with a man in an expensive suit, famous for never showing an ounce of compassion, Artur Montenegro. He barely looks at her, already about to walk on, until João starts crying, and Lúcia, her voice almost fading away, asks for the impossible. "Sir, just a little milk for my brother." Artur nearly says no, but then, suddenly, he freezes. His eyes lock onto an old pendant hanging from the girl's neck. Time stops. He falls to his knees, desperate, recognizing a detail only he could know. Now what? Is fate playing a cruel trick, or is this a chance to change 2 lives forever? Stay with me to discover the truth no one ever imagined about this little girl and this millionaire. The whole city seemed sad that night. It was as if the rain was falling harder just to remind everyone that nobody misses those who live on the sidewalk. Lúcia walked slowly, feeling each icy drop slide down her face, mixing with hair plastered to her forehead. She curled up small, doing her best to protect João, her tiny little brother swaddled in a blanket that was much too thin. He was just a baby, but he felt it all, the cold, the hunger, the ache of not being held by their mother anymore. João whined softly, like he already knew not to cry out too loud for attention. The wind howled between the cars and trees, and every step Lúcia took grew heavier. Her feet ached, soaked, and old shoes much too big for her. A well-dressed man passed, glanced quickly, and dodged around her as if she were just another obstacle in the way. A woman with an enormous umbrella came closer, but clutched her purse tightly and crossed the street, avoiding Lucia's eyes. Nobody wanted to know. Nobody stopped. The smell of food wafted from the restaurant doors. That warm aroma of meat, fresh rice, and bread, but for Lúcia, it only made the ache in her belly worse. João buried his little face against her chest and cried a little louder, the desperate cry of a baby who just wants warm milk. Lúcia stroked his cheek gently, feeling his tiny fingers gripping her shirt. She whispered, her voice ragged, "Easy, João. I'm here, okay? Don't cry." The traffic light turned red. Cars stopped, drivers fiddled with their phones, listened to loud music, complained about the jam. But no one looked out. No one noticed the little girl with drooping socks, rain-soaked clothes clinging to her, flip-flops already falling apart. Lúcia pulled the baby closer, feeling a sharper pain in her chest. Would anyone see them? Would anyone even stop, just to ask if they were hungry? She didn't know how many days she'd held back tears. All she felt was that lump in her throat, so much worse when her stomach growled. She remembered her mother. Her face flickered by in bittersweet flashes. Mom curled up on cold nights too, humming softly so she wouldn't frighten her children. Now, Lúcia hugged João's ragged blanket tighter, trying to give him that same comfort, never really reaching the safety they'd once had. The rain picked up again, drops falling harder. A gust of wind made Lúcia shiver from head to toe. She looked up at the sky, as if hoping for some answer, but all she got was more cold water on her face. Her eyes stung. She couldn't tell if it was the rain or the tears. On one corner, a street lamp flickered. Lúcia headed toward it, wanting even the tiniest bit of shelter. The ground there was mud and trash from people's leftover food. She glanced around, desperate for a kind face. But everyone hurried for their cars, running from the cold. Some crossed to the other side of the street before the light changed, just to avoid the street kids. She hugged João harder, feeling his body get damp. The baby started to hiccup quietly, then let out a stronger wail. Pain tightened her chest so badly she wanted to scream. But she couldn't. Her eyes darted around, searching for a miracle. She saw a diner packed with smiling people, chatting, laughing out loud. Only those looking outside could see the girl alone out there clutching her baby brother. Time dragged. Lúcia tried to distract João, spoke gently, sang a snippet of an old lullaby. All she got was more crying. He gnawed his fist, hungry for a familiar scent. Lúcia knew. No milk, no cookie, nothing. Just that gnawing ache in both their bellies. She leaned her wet back against the wall, feeling the chill seep in. She waited there, watching the city as if life marched on, only without her. A car skidded through a puddle, But Lucia didn't flinch when dirty water splashed her toes. She just looked up, silent, too tired even to hope. Underneath it all, being ignored hurt more than the cold. She wanted someone to see her, to ask something simple. Are you okay? Or just, do you want something to eat? Now Joao had stopped crying, making only a sad little noise, worn out and curling in even closer. The weight of sadness pressed down on her small shoulders, but she didn't let go of her brother for anything. She kept her eyes open, trying to be strong, because that's what her mother would have done. But it was hard. Her chest hurt. Her stomach hurt. The world didn't even seem to see. As she watched the car lights gleaming in puddles, she knew she had to keep going. For Joao. For herself. Hoping that one day, someone would really see them, if only for a moment. The wind cut through her skin, even under the awning. It wasn't night yet, but it felt like it. The sky was iron gray and heavy, the rain beating on the roofs and flowing through dirty gutters. Lucia pulled her ancient jacket tighter over Joao, who'd stopped crying. Now he just sucked on his own tiny fist, cheeks flushed red from the cold. She curled in on herself, trying to shield her brother's body with her own. She barely wanted to cry or speak anymore. Strange how rain could wash away everything, the dirt, the faces of hurried people, but never the emptiness crushing her heart. At that moment, she felt the pendant against her neck. Cold. She thought it was just another raindrop, but realized it was her chain slipping from her torn shirt. She looked up, swiped away the tears with a dirty finger, and held that little pendant steadily in her palm. It was a star. Simple, made of dark metal, a single pale stone in its center, tiny as a pinhead. Not pretty, not for anyone who didn't know. But in this whole world, it was the only thing truly hers. She turned her face away, afraid an adult might come by and try to snatch it off her neck. She already knew. On the street, anything valuable disappeared fast if you got careless. But that star. That, never. Lucia hung onto her chain, her finger wrapped tight around the star. All she could think of was her mother's voice. Funny, her mother had gotten so weak at the end, hardly able to get out of bed, but still seemed big, strong. She'd had a way of smiling even when tired, like she held some good secret deep inside. And right before closing her eyes for good, she'd pulled Lucia close and whispered, in a voice light as a breeze, "One day this is going to change everything, my girl. Never take it off, promise? Promise me, sweetie?" Back then, Lucia didn't understand. She thought her mother just wanted to comfort her, like she did when telling stories at bedtime. But now, here, with her feet soaked through, Joao trembling with cold, she understood it differently. It was like her mother's voice clung to her from the inside out, telling her to hold on tight. The heavier the time, the heavier the pendant seemed to get, heavy with longing, memory, hope. She was terrified of losing it. Lucia hunched her shoulders, bowed her head, and sniffed her brother's damp hair. He wiggled, grumbled softly, and she pressed his warm cheek against the star for just a second. She closed her eyes. Prayed, messy and uncertain, the way she'd seen her mother do. "Give me strength, Mom. Just for today. Just one more day." The city didn't care. Next to her, cars sped past. A woman in high heels swerved around them, never glancing down. A man with a fancy umbrella stepped into a puddle, scowled, looked like he'd scold her, but just walked faster and vanished. The smell of food drifted from someplace way beyond reach. On the street, reflections danced in puddles, making everything look festive, but for Lucia it was just another show she wasn't invited to. Joao slept, breathing fast, his fist still near his mouth. The pendant tapped his chin, and Lucia just watched for a while. The metal was cold, but her memories of it were always warm. The star always rested on her mother's chest, right over her heart. That's where she'd nap on good days, listening to her mother's heartbeat drumming softly, feeling her breathing slow. When her mom coughed so hard she couldn't breathe, Lucia would hold her hand and whisper, "It'll pass, Mommy. It'll pass." But it didn't. Lucia traced the edge of the pendant. The little stone in the center was dull, dirty, but in her mind it still shimmered. Must have meant so much to her mother, right? Otherwise, why would she beg her never, ever to take it off? Maybe the pendant was a key, or a promise. Or maybe, she thought softly, it was just because her mother wanted her to have something to hold on to, when there was nothing left. The rain slowed, leaving only the sounds of cars, hurried footsteps. The cold stayed, relentless. Lucia swallowed hard. Her stomach griped, growling like a hungry animal. She tried to ignore it. It was always the same: hunger, fear, longing. But amid everything, Lucia felt a strange, brave spark rise up, like those stories her mother told about people facing dragons. She looked at the wide street, the restaurant glowing across the way, the burly guards at the door. And she gripped the pendant tighter. One day this will change everything. One day. Joao took a deep breath, hiccuped quietly in his sleep. Lucia lowered her head, kissed his forehead, and murmured, "I'll take care of you. I promise." She held the pendant until her hand ached, as if all her sadness, hunger, and hope could fit inside that one little thing. It wasn't much, not to anyone on the outside. But for her, it was everything. All that remained of her mother, of her home, of the time she'd found warmth instead of fear. And when her courage failed, she knew she would squeeze that star and remember the promise. No matter what anyone said, no matter how many doors slammed in her face. Beneath the awning, with Joao in her arms and the pendant on her chest, Lucia drew a deep breath and decided she'd never let go of her treasure. Because, in the hardest way, she'd learned that when there's almost nothing left, hope is the greatest treasure you'll ever have. The night's cold was in her bones now. At first, Lucia tried to ignore it, pretended her arms trembled only because of the wind, but the emptiness in her stomach hurt worse than anything. Joao, bundled in a thin blanket, slept fitfully in her lap. Sometimes he'd hiccup softly in his sleep, because even dreaming, a hungry baby feels the ache. The sound of cars speeding by splattered dirty water and mud onto the curb. Everything felt far away, except for the scent of food drifting from the beautiful restaurant across the street. Inside, people laughed. It was easy to see big windows, warm lights, glasses raised, coats draped over chairs, beautiful people helping themselves as if there were no world outside. A girl with curly hair threw her head back, laughing, right as Lucia's stomach rumbled for real, a loud hunger that brought shame. She hugged Joao tighter, feeling him stir, and thought, if I don't ask, we'll go to bed with nothing. It took her a long time to stand up. Fear weighed heavier than hunger. But she looked at her brother, his cheeks flushed beneath their grime, and remembered everything her mother used to say, "Be brave, sweetheart. Being brave doesn't hurt," and she set off, each step slow and careful, as if walking on glass. The security guards didn't even glance at her as she stood beside the door. Both wore black suits. One crossed his arms, his face stone cold. The other chewed gum and stared into space. Lucia thought about asking someone in the kitchen, maybe a kind lady in an apron, the sort that smiled once in a while. But nobody came out. The people who passed by slipped into the restaurant without noticing her. No one made eye contact. Her throat was parched. She was scared someone would yell, tell her to leave, just like she'd heard so many times before. But hunger tugged stronger. Joao began to fuss, kicking his legs like he was crying in a dream. The blanket was soaked at the ends, heavy in her hand. She did her best not to cry too, because, she knew, if one tear fell, she'd never be able to speak. She stepped closer to the door. The guards looked her over, top to bottom, with the expression of someone who already knows what she is. She didn't know where to look, just felt her heart thumping so fast it hurt. "Sir," her voice came out tiny, trembling, "is there any bread for me and my brother?" The men exchanged a quick look, half mocking, all heart. They said nothing. One turned his face away, the other fiddled with his earpiece, pretending to adjust his jacket. Nothing. As though Lucia wasn't even there. She wished she could vanish. She looked down. Her sneakers were so worn her toes poked through. A puddle reflected the restaurant's light, and in the glass door, she saw her own reflection, a small girl with messy hair holding a skinny baby with a makeshift cap. That didn't look like her. It looked like one of those cardboard cutouts people ignore. Someone hurried up the sidewalk, bumped into her elbow, didn't say sorry. Lucia didn't move. She wanted so much to ask again, to insist, but her heart was already too bruised. She squeezed the star at her throat, that heavy, cold pendant. "Mama, one day this little star will help." But that hope felt so far away, almost impossible just then. The smell of bread, of meat, grew stronger, almost mocking. Inside, a waiter served soup in a pristine white bowl. Lucia drew herself up, felt her throat burn. It wasn't just hunger, it was knowing that no one in there would look at her. No one would say, "Come in, sit down, have a bite." It was worse than hunger because it hurt her chest, stung in her eyes. Across the glass, a girl around her age fiddled on a pink phone. Her father cut a steak, focused, while his daughter smiled at her screen, safe, distracted. Lucia remembered her mother, back when Joao was just a swollen belly. The memory nearly made her cry again. She held on. Her hands hurt. The baby began to whimper softly. The people inside never once looked their way. One guard glared, made a sharp gesture, and Lucia shuffled back a step, nearly stumbling. The cold felt worse. Exhaustion hit her all at once. A sad thought ran through her mind. Was I born to be invisible? She wanted to scream, but knew it wouldn't matter. She stood there, frozen, while time stretched out. Joao's crying grew louder. The cars roared by, rain starting up again, heavier this time. No one noticed her face, red cheeks, sweat and tears mixed together. Just another girl on the street. Inside, laughter burst out, the lights glowed warmer, the glass thicker, two separate worlds. Lucia turned away, clutching the pendant even tighter, tasting her own tears. Her brother in her arms was just weight and warmth. All she had. The shame still burned, but hunger was stronger. And even invisible, miserable, exhausted, Lucia swallowed hard and stood by the curb, listening to her brother's cries, facing a closed door, and a hunger that just kept growing. The rain had eased up, but the wind hadn't. Lucia adjusted the ragged scarf around her brother, shielding him from the biting gusts. The baby squirmed, sniffling, eyes squeezed shut, face red from hunger. She knew what came after soft crying, a desperate wail that always brought stares, shame, and angry looks from everyone around. People bustled under the restaurant's awning, shined-up shoes, high heels, children laughing because they had food and warmth. The smell of grilled meat inside made her dizzy, her stomach rumble even louder. She wanted to run away, but hunger rooted her to the spot. At the door, two men in suits laughed over some joke. As she drew near, one turned his back, the other didn't budge. Lucia stared at the ground, afraid to ask again and get only silence in return. But Joao's cries got louder, sharper, slicing through her chest like an alarm. She gently rocked her brother the way Mom used to, but it didn't help. It had to be pure hunger. Then the restaurant door creaked open and a wave of warm food-scented air rolled out, along with a man on his own. He walked with such purpose, his suit spotlessly crisp, face hard, the kind of expensive, sharp cologne that tickles your nose. He didn't seem to walk through the same cold city as her at all. Lucia had heard stories about this man. The other street kids called him Montenegro, said he owned half the neighborhood, ran City Hall, ran companies, but never once tossed a coin to anyone. Even from far off, you could sense he was different. His eyes, fixed ahead, never wavering, never carrying the weight of sadness. Joao let out a high, sharp cry, and Lucia felt panic and shame climbing up her cheeks. This was no time for pride. She took a deep breath, forced strength into her voice, and hurried after him, her steps awkward with the baby's weight. "Sir," she called, softly at first, almost breathless. He didn't turn, just faced the other way, walked faster. She nearly gave up. But Joao, his face all wet and scrunched, wailed so loud it hurt to hear. People frowned in their direction. An old lady shook her head like Lucia was an ugly sore on the clean sidewalk. "Sir, please, just some milk for my brother." This time, her voice rang out, urgent, near shouting. She had to forget her shame. Joao felt smaller by the minute in her arms. Just some milk, she thought, not even asking for food, or for herself, just for milk. The man paused for a second or two, as if a fly had bothered him. Lucia almost believed it would happen. But he kept walking, head high, eyes on his phone. The city's noise swallowed her words. Seconds passed that felt like hours. Lucia looked down, swallowing hard, cheeks burning. Her arms ached. The scarf slipped. Joao. Oh, Joao wouldn't stop crying, just sobbing now, chin tucked into her old sweatshirt, his body feverish, but she pretended not to notice. Still, Lucia fought not to cry. She noticed the shop windows nearby, the polished shoes, the restaurant's bright neon flickering behind her. All of it felt distant, like a dream that didn't belong to kids like her. She stood there, letting the cold night rain settle on her cheeks, wondering if it was worth asking again, or if she should try her luck at some other place. But suddenly, on the breeze, she caught that whiff of cologne again. Along with it, a curious feeling, like an invisible thread tied her to that man. Something odd in the way he pocketed his phone, hesitated before crossing the street. Once more, Lucia felt like a shadow. She looked down at her dirty feet, wished she could disappear. But they couldn't. She and Joao had only each other. The weight of her cold pendant pressed against her chest, forcing back a memory both sweet and stinging. She clutched the pendant with her stiff, freezing fingers. Remembered her mother's words. "This will protect you, honey. Never lose it. It brings luck, brings change." So many promises that seemed like lies now. Luck? Change? All she saw was cold, hunger, and a distant, well-dressed man. Cars crept along the wet street, colored lights bouncing off puddles. The baby in her arms whimpered, tired and quiet. The silence between sobs was what hurt the most. In her head, everything was a thunderstorm. Fear, grief, rage at the world, missing her mom. She thought, nobody really sees a lost child on the sidewalk. Nobody stops. The man in the suit just proved it, never faltered, never looked her in the eye. Just another brisk step, another blank stare. Maybe, for him, a child asking for food was a nuisance. For the others, it seemed normal not to notice a hungry kid. They'd seen it 1,000 times, just part of the scenery. The night, which had only been cold before, now felt even harsher. Lúcia rocked her brother once more, holding the pendant tightly and softly, only for him, said, "Shh, Joao. We'll make it." She wanted to shout at the world, but only another tired sigh came out. She fixed his scarf again, nuzzled Joao close, blinked back the tears. The restaurant was still packed with happy, well-fed people, but for her, there was only this damp sidewalk, someone's stubbed-out cigarette, and that expensive scent fading away. Deep down, a question pounded in her chest. Would anyone ever really see her? Or was she just another forgotten face among so many? Lúcia started to turn away, not knowing that, at that very moment, something invisible had already changed. But right then, it was just one more ignored plea in the cold. Above the sound of cars and the rain pounding the restaurant's awnings, suddenly everything seemed to move in slow motion. Artur was almost turning away, right? His briefcase clutched in his hand, his expensive wool coat dripping with rain, his face unmoved, rigid, as if he didn't feel anything at all. Lúcia looked at him with a scrap of hope left, hugging Joao, the baby swaddled in a thin blanket, face wet, just taking deep breaths to keep herself from crying, too. She was about to give up, her head already dropping, when Artur froze out of nowhere. Simply stopped, as if he'd been shocked. His eyes locked onto a spot on the girl's neck, between the strands of rain-matted hair, just above the pendant she clutched out of habit, without even thinking. That little star, golden, scuffed with age, but still holding on to a stubborn glimmer. The one her mother had left, the one she gripped whenever she missed her too much, or when the day felt impossible. Lúcia spotted the man's stare, tensed up, not understanding. Hugged the baby closer, waiting, unsure if he'd yell, chase her off, or call someone to drag her away. But he didn't. Artur let the briefcase fall, almost without realizing it. His hand shook as he reached out. He knelt, slow, silent, almost as if afraid to scare her off. Lúcia wanted to run, but she was too tired, her legs aching from walking all day, her stomach cramping. The baby was quiet now, eyes half closed, breathing in the sin of her neck for comfort. The man knelt in front of her, right there on the wet sidewalk, his suit worth more than most houses. But that wasn't what drew her attention. It was his face, how it changed all at once. That stone expression, the kind you get from living behind bulletproof glass, cracked. His eyes suddenly looked afraid, almost lost, as if he hadn't seen something like this in years. He stared at the pendant, stared again, not wanting to believe it. And in that instant, even the wind and rain seemed to pause, just to listen. Car horns faded. The people running out of the restaurant, dashing for shelter, didn't even notice. The two of them stood there, a man who never stepped down for anything, a girl whose feet ached from the cold, fighting to hide her pain and her fear. His face was close, eyes brimming with tears, lips trembling as if he were holding back 1,000 words. No sound came out, at least, not yet. He touched the little necklace slowly, just with the tip of one finger. He ran his finger over the pendant, that star shape, exactly like the one from the memory he keeps locked away, hidden, something he tries and fails to forget, his little daughter, his wife, that family he believes he lost all at once. Lúcia's eyes went wide, her face dirty, cheeks red and raw from wind and cold. She didn't understand why the rich man was shaking in front of her, or why he seemed on the verge of tears just from looking at the necklace hanging there. She braced for the worst. She guessed they might try to take it away from her. She was sure grown-ups always wanted to take away the little she had left. And Artur took a deep breath, as though every drop of rain weighed a ton. His steady hands, hands that knew paperwork, cold decisions, control, those hands would not stop shaking. He looked at Lúcia. He saw something on her face he recognized. Something old, maybe the shape of the eyes, the curve of the nose, the way she shielded the baby while enduring stares from everyone else. The silence was so loud it became a roar inside both their heads. Only Joao's gentle whimper broke it, and Lúcia automatically stroked her brother's tiny cheek. Artur looked at her, eyes asking for permission. He pointed at the pendant, almost begging, his voice caught. "Can I see?" It came out barely audible. Lucia didn't know if she could, but she didn't have the strength to refuse. She slowly let go of the chain, her thin neck exposed, already marked by the grime and hardships of a life far too heavy for someone only 7 years old. Artur took the pendant, felt its light weight, rubbed his thumb over it as if hoping to stir memories, certainty, a time he would never get back. He closed his eyes for a second, finally letting out a silent sob that had been stuck for years. He looked back at the girl, now desperate, trying to understand. His mouth shaped silent questions. How? Why? Where did you get this? Lucia swallowed hard. She'd never seen a grown-up so afraid, not even when her own mother was dying, not even the last time she'd been told to leave the shelter. There, the man's tears and the way he knelt down made everything feel stranger, but also less frightening. Deep inside, she felt something shifting, like maybe the world was actually seeing her for the first time, even if just for a moment. The rain picked up again, soaking everything around them, but they didn't move. Two strangers bound by a tiny piece of hope. The pendant glimmered, and Artur held it like it was the only thing that mattered. Time itself paused, and for an instant, neither of them was rich or poor, just people, trying in any way they could to hold on to what mattered. Artur stayed there, kneeling on the rain-soaked pavement, next to puddles reflecting the yellow light from the restaurant. You couldn't tell if it was rain dripping from his hair or real tears running down his face, but it was clear that something in him had changed. He gently took Lucia's hand, barely holding on, as if he was scared that if he squeezed too hard she'd disappear. His voice came out soft, faltering. He pointed to the pendant, which was grimy, with just a hint of shine, swinging from her chest. Where did you get this? He asked, not raising his eyes, as if the question itself weighed a ton. Lucia stepped back, held her breath. The rain had already frozen them both, but his words sent another chill through her. She looked down at her brother, his cheeks red with cold, then back at Artur, not saying anything for a while. She knew no stranger had ever really asked about the necklace, not the police, not anyone at the shelter, no one. Only her mother, who always told her to take care of it. She answered quietly, almost to the ground. It was Mom's. She gave it to me before going to the hospital. She said it was so I'd never forget who we were. It was valuable, not money, but family. Artur shut his eyes instantly, like someone who's just been punched in the gut. He let out a long breath and placed his hand on his forehead. You could see the glint of tears in his eyes, trying to stay in control and failing. He turned toward the sidewalk, searching, lost, for answers in the wet asphalt. No one spoke for a few seconds. Only the sound of cars driving by and João softly whimpering with hunger. The wind blew icy gusts that cut right to the bone. The smell of good food from the restaurant contrasted with the rumbling in Lucia's empty stomach. Artur tried to speak, but his voice broke. He swallowed hard, took a shaky breath, staring at the pendant. His fingers actually trembled as they touched the metal star, as if he were afraid it might break. I've seen this before, he said, his tone falling apart. It belonged to my daughter. It was identical. He choked on his words, his eyes going wide as he really looked at Lucia, as if seeing something impossible. Lucia noticed he was sobbing, even though he was a grown man, important, in an expensive suit. It scared her, and brought on something else that felt strange, because for the first time, a grown-up looked as lost as she felt. In the silence that settled, every raindrop striking concrete sounded louder. The headlights from passing cabs flickered on everything around them. Lucia held her brother tight, her heart squeezed by fear, but, at the same time, a tiny spark was lighting up inside her. Artur's face kept changing. He blinked hard, clenched his jaw, bit his lip the way a child does when trying not to cry. He seemed to return to the past, because he started speaking softly to himself, staring into nothing. I lost everything. Everything in that fire. My wife, my daughter. All that was left was a pendant. Just like this, he murmured, like he was talking to a ghost. Lucia, with the built-in courage of someone with nowhere left to run, pulled on the chain and showed it up close. You're not going to take it, are you? She asked, shivering. The uncertainty spilled from her words, but there was a toughness there, the kind forged by life's blows. The man nodded several times, sobbing quietly. No, no. I'd never. I need to know. Do you remember your mother? His face searched for hope, as if the whole world hinged on her answer. Lucia felt a warm feeling stir inside her, something she barely recognized, almost hope. She remembered her mother. The weak laughter in those last days, her hands always warming their foreheads, the smell of plain soap, the last kiss on her forehead before the hospital. She remembered the gentle voice, "Take care of Joao. I love you, sweetheart," and how hurriedly she'd slipped the pendant around Lucia's neck, like she knew she'd never come back. Artur, still on his knees, seemed to melt. He was no longer giant or powerful, just a broken man, begging for answers from a frightened girl holding a hungry baby. The silence between them was so heavy it could have been sliced in two. Lucia saw that his pain was just like hers. For a fleeting moment, the two were like family, speaking the same mute language, but too afraid to believe it. Joao, restless, started howling louder. It was hunger, it was exhaustion, it was cold. The noise popped their somber bubble. Lucia did everything she could to soothe him, worn out but trying to warm the baby with her thin hands. Artur steadied his breath, wiping away the worst of his tears. He looked at Lucia again, trying to be the adult, but only managed to whisper, "My daughter." She was little, she had curls like this, look, and sharp eyes, just like you. Her name was... He stopped, stumbled, stared straight at Lucia. "What's your name, kid?" The answer came slow, like she was swallowing each syllable. "Lucia. I'm Lucia." That seemed to break Artur completely. His mouth trembled as if the words wouldn't fit inside. He buried his face in his hands and wept the way rich men never cry in public, loud, ugly, real. Even without fully understanding, Lucia felt the weight of it. Old pain mixed with hope. She didn't know if she should hug him, run away, or just stand there. Her brother fell asleep from exhaustion against her chest, and the rain didn't seem as cold anymore. There, on that bit of sidewalk, everything hung suspended, frozen between the past and whatever might be. The rich man and the poor girl, together because of a pendant and a memory, each trying to find in the other what the entire world had denied them. No one else saw, no one else mattered, just them, and the strange possibility of family. The rain wasn't falling as hard anymore, just heavy drops drumming on the bright awning of the restaurant, drip, drip, drip like a heartbeat refusing to stop. Lucia sat on the curb, getting her thin skirt all wet. The baby squirmed in her arms, his cheeks pressed against her shoulder, half asleep, half whimpering in that way of someone who doesn't understand the world, only that it's cold, and it hurts. Artur sat down beside her, lowering himself onto the dirty pavement in his expensive suit, not that he seemed to notice. He looked at Lucia differently now. The lights behind him left only the hard lines of his face, the marked brow, the red eyes. Still, he tried to steady his voice, asking, almost whispering, "Sweetheart, can you tell me? Tell me everything." At first, Lucia didn't know if she could trust him. She fiddled with the necklace at her neck, small dirty fingers trembling. The star-shaped pendant swung, catching the last drops of rain. She pressed her lips tight, looked at her brother, then at the man, stuck for a long time in that space, as if choosing whom to look at was dangerous. I haven't got much to tell, mister. Mama was good. She always said things were going to get better, that we'd go home when she got well. But then she got thinner, paler, stopped breathing sometimes and asked me to sing to her. I'd sing quietly, you know, so she wouldn't forget how to smile. Her words came out soft, almost disappearing under the distant noise of cars and the rain tapping on metal. Artur closed his eyes a moment, letting the words hit him differently. He saw the little girl, but behind her, he could also see his old house burning, those screams from a night he'd never managed to forget. Lucia took a deep breath, smelled the baby, pulled the scrap of cloth tighter around him. At first we had food, but then everything ran out, little by little. The milk turned to water. The bread turned to nothing. And Joao turned purple, cried from hunger. I'd ask people, but no one looked, no one ever answered. She stopped. Silence filled everything. Just the sound of dripping, the stink of sewage, and the baby fussing into her belly. One day, Mama asked me to promise. She said, "Take care of your brother. Never let go. Never. This pendant will change your luck. Honey, just wait and believe it. Don't sell it, don't trade it, because it's the only thing we've got that's still good." I promised. And then the next night, she didn't wake up. I tried shaking her, calling her, yelling real quiet. She just lay there, wouldn't open her eyes. That was when Lucia finally broke down, quietly crying, sniffling, hiding her face in the baby. Only this time, the tears came for real, painful, like she couldn't even remember the last time she cried, like she'd kept everything locked inside and now there was no more room. The man couldn't bring himself to touch her. He didn't know if he should. He just gripped his own knee, holding himself together. His eyes glittered wet, tears sliding slowly down his serious face. She spoke. "I waited for someone to come for us. Nobody did. The neighbors just complained about the smell, told us to leave. So I ran out with Joao all wrapped up, scared someone would take him from me. I've slept behind garbage bins, gotten soaked in filthy rain, had stomach cramps and got through it. But Joao's only got me. I can't get sick. If I fall, he's gone too, just like Mama. Cars drove by nearby, people crossed the street dodging rain. Nobody noticed the three of them crushed into the sidewalk. It was like they'd vanished from the real world. There was only that sadness, that cold stuck to their skin. Lúcia grabbed the pendant in her hand, squeezed it, showed it to Artur. She said it was from family, that it came from someone important, that I had to keep it safe, like it was her own heart. The girl looked into the man's eyes. There was no anger there, just a silent plea. See me, believe me, don't let me go now. Artur saw all of it, and it made his face ache, not just from sadness. It was a different pain in his chest, a guilt, an overwhelming wish to turn back time or just to have seen sooner what was right in front of him. The baby in his sister's arms suddenly woke and gave a thin cry. Lúcia didn't panic. She just pulled out an old bottle from her pocket, only water left, shook it, and offered it to her brother with all the care in the world, trying to fool his hunger, trying to protect him in a way no one had ever protected her. The man, always seen as so hard, felt ashamed of himself for the first time. His hands shook. He didn't speak, just watched, as if, at last, he could hear a story no one else ever wanted to hear, not even him. For a moment, everything went silent. The restaurant lights seemed far away, the cold seeped right to the bone, but it was lighter there, because for the first time, someone really listened. And, sitting on that filthy sidewalk, with tears mingling with rain, Artur knew something inside him had changed. There was no going back. The sky was still gray when Artur spoke. His voice sounded choked, and for a second, Lúcia didn't know if she'd heard him right. He asked her to go with him. He didn't give much detail, just said he needed an answer. Trust me. Just for today, a quick whisper, like he didn't quite believe the words himself. Lúcia looked at Joao, who was almost asleep again, clinging to her collar, then at the black car waiting on the corner, the driver standing by with an umbrella in hand. Suddenly everything grew quiet. Even the sound of the cars on the avenue seemed far away. The whole world, for a few seconds, shrank to just her little brother, and that man who was still trembling a bit despite putting on a brave face. She hesitated. They'd always told her never to trust strangers, never to accept anything from men in suits. Those people don't even see us, old Mrs. Norma from the square used to say. But Artur wasn't a stranger anymore. Not after so many tears, so many questions, a look that hurt because it was so desperate. His hand waited, reaching out. Their eyes locked and wouldn't let go. Deep inside, Lúcia felt the fear take over, but also a fierce urge to believe. She owed her mother at least that much, a chance, maybe, that the pendant would change everything. She breathed deep, hugged Joao tighter to her chest, and got up slowly. Walking to Artur's car, the ground was slick, wet from the rain. The driver opened the door. He looked them over, first surprised, then a little embarrassed, looking away because he didn't know if he should say something. Lúcia slid in, almost shrinking, dirty feet leaving marks on the pale carpet, trying to hide her soiled hands, her fear plain on her face. The driver tried a small smile, but only silence came out. Inside the car, everything was unfamiliar. The seat was so soft it felt like sinking for good. There was none of the greasy, musty street smell, just leather and a faint perfume, almost like the hotel soap she sometimes found on corner benches. Joao grumbled, "Eyes still closed." Lúcia rocked him gently, trying to calm both him and her racing heartbeat. Her arms already ached, but she didn't want to let her brother go even long enough to fix her hair. She could feel Artur watching her, lost and wanting to talk but not finding the words. He cleared his throat, fiddled with his hands, scratched his watch over and over. At every red light, he glanced at her in the rearview mirror. The only sound was the engine, almost nothing else. Sometimes a raindrop would drum on the glass. The street lights flashed across her face, painting shadows in those deep, frightened eyes. Lúcia didn't know where they were going. She only heard him say clinic. He said it softly, almost like apologizing. That made her even more afraid. Just a check, that's all, he said, his voice even lower, avoiding her gaze. He looked ashamed, or maybe just tired of asking questions there were no answers for. In that warm car, the chill ran down her back. Outside, she was always on guard, eyes tuned to every corner, every person, every honk. In here, it was something else entirely, a silence that hurt more than the city's noise. Joao stretched his arm against her belly, and Lúcia clutched him closer, determined to shield him from the world, from shock, from whatever came next. The car slid through streets she only knew by name, overheard from grown-ups, places with shining buildings, stores still glowing late into the night. Every time someone in fancy clothes peered out their window, her heart pounded faster, almost bursting in her chest. Would they really go into a hospital? Would anyone believe her story? Arthur kept fidgeting with his watch. Sometimes he shut his eyes, breathing deep, as if solving every problem in his head and never getting there. His face was different from the start of the night, drawn, scared, just like hers. He, so rich, so powerful, now looked only like a man searching for answers in a child's eyes. In the back seat, Lúcia pulled out the pendant and stared at the worn star. She stroked it gently, remembering her mother saying that when everything seemed impossible, she should trust. She looked up at Arthur, and suddenly he noticed the gesture. They met each other's gaze in the mirror. He smiled, almost by accident, crookedly, like he couldn't believe he was really there. When they reached the clinic, the car stopped gently at the door. A security guard opened the door. This time, Lúcia really shook. She was ashamed of her bare feet, her stained shirt, but she breathed deep, because João needed her. Arthur got out first, straightened his suit jacket, and stood beside her, almost protective. He offered his hand to help her out. Lúcia, half ashamed, half proud, accepted. The waiting room was cold, white, full of landscape paintings. It smelled so clean it was almost sweet and strange. Lúcia sat in a corner, keeping João wrapped in her jacket. Arthur paced, checking his phone and putting it away, muttering to himself words no one understood. When the nurse called, Lucia's legs nearly gave out. Arthur stepped in, gently set his hand on her shoulder. It was a light touch, unexpected, but it felt different, sincere somehow. "It'll be quick," he promised, almost apologetically. She just nodded, tears shining in her eyes, lost between fear, hope, memories of her mother, everything swirling together. Down that icy hallway, brother in arms, a millionaire at her side, Lúcia didn't know if she was dreaming or having a nightmare. She only knew one thing. Somewhere in there, a new life might be waiting. More than any test, more than any answer, all she felt was an immense hope that someone might actually be looking out for them now. And because of that, she closed her eyes and kept going. At first, Lúcia barely noticed the weight of other people's stares. The gate to Arthur's house opened slowly, creaking, like even the old iron was scared of her. But it was beautiful there, neatly kept gardens, trimmed grass, the scent of flowers in the air. The driver told her to go in, wiping down the seat for the baby. Lúcia hugged her brother tight, both of them still soaked from the rain, but the car had stopped a while ago now. She walked through the huge hallway, not daring to look up. She was afraid she might break something just with her gaze. A woman with hair in a bun and spotless clothes stood in the doorway, arms crossed. No hello, nothing. She just mouthed, almost without sound, "Are you taking those two upstairs, Mr. Arthur?" He only glanced back, exhausted, and went up. The corridor looked like a hospital, everything white, too clean. Her footsteps echoed. João started coughing, whining softly. Lucia's shame was a sharp ache in her gut. She wanted to apologize to the rug, to the walls, to everything. Arthur just stopped at a bedroom door, opened it gently. "You stay here." Inside, the room was warm, everything smelled of new laundry, no people smell, no mother, no life. They left the two of them there, with a massive bed, a soft pillow, toys never touched in the corner. But none of it was theirs. The silence there bit more than any street's cold. 2 minutes later, the voices started outside. Whispering, but at heart, loud enough on purpose. "The boss has lost it? What for, now? They're gonna steal everything." Shuffling feet. Someone knocked gently. It was the same woman from before. She held a towel at arm's length, like garbage. "You can bathe the baby. There's soap there. After, try not to dirty the bed." She left with her chin high, giving Lúcia a hard look up and down. Lúcia wanted to disappear, to be part of the wall, to turn to dust. She sat on the floor, tried taking off João's clothes, almost ripping the old rags. The baby bit down on her hand from hunger, and she pretended it was nothing. While she scrubbed her brother with care, she heard laughter in the hallway. People speaking loud. "Where's the homeless kid sleeping now?" Soft snickers. Lúcia dropped her head, went over to the window. Outside, rain dripped through the leaves, a sparrow shivered under a branch. She understood right then, no matter where she was, she'd always be a stranger. All she had was João. Suddenly he started crying harder, the cry of hunger, not just cold. Lúcia hugged him, rocked him, hummed a song from her mother, softly so no one could hear, but so full of longing it almost choked her. They came to fetch them for breakfast. But when they entered the kitchen, everyone paused. There were men in suits, women with jewelry, arms folded, and chilly glares. Arthur sat among them, unmoving. He didn't look at the others, just slid a chair out, told Lúcia to sit. She froze, imagined her mother's hand gently pushing her. Go on, sweetheart. The floor seemed to leap under her feet. She was that afraid of doing something wrong. She sat very carefully, holding João close. Silverware clattered on cups, but nobody spoke to her, hardly even looked. It was like Lúcia was a stain. She saw a woman slide the tray away, out of her reach. Only crumbs and crushed bread left for her. Not a word was said. A young man leaned over to whisper in Artur's ear. This is the end of the Montenegros. Artur's face went rigid, heavy. Under the table, his fist clenched. The words started spilling from others' mouths, each thinking they were helping. You'll ruin your reputation. That girl doesn't even look like family. Imagine what people will say. The oldest woman glanced at Lúcia, making a disgusted noise. Those street kids only bring disease and trouble. Lúcia lowered her eyes, but didn't cry. She looked at her brother, milk smeared around his mouth, and drew a deep breath. She thought of the street, the rain, the terror of having to flee again. Her body trembled, but inside, she knew she had to hold out. She'd promised her mother, herself, and the baby. Artur excused himself, barely more than a whisper. He took Lúcia's plate and served her food himself. The room fell silent at once, as if they couldn't believe it. Artur looked at her, eyes red, breathing heavy. He seemed to want to speak, but only ran his hand over his head, slowly, and stayed silent. The rest of breakfast dragged on. People came and went, murmuring, always eyeing the girl from the corners of their eyes. Even the household staff acted differently. They cleaned nearby, scrubbing harder, slamming things, scowling. Lúcia didn't move a muscle, just hugged João. After, she took the baby back to the bedroom. She sat on the floor, stomach full but unable to enjoy it. Her chest felt heavier, the words of the others echoing in her mind. She thought of her mother, one day, sweetheart. This will change everything. But when? Her life felt like it didn't belong to her. By late afternoon, she heard more arguing. Artur was shouting with someone, his voice rough. She's just a child. The answer came back harsh. Don't ruin everything out of pity. Her and João's names circled from mouth to mouth, like they were nothing but a problem. Lúcia looked at her brother and held him tight. Even though she was scared, embarrassed, she whispered to him, I'll take care of you. No one is taking us away from here. She closed her eyes, smelled the scent of a clean pillow, and wished, for just 1 minute, to live in a world where she didn't have to ask for permission just to exist. Inside the cocoon that was their embrace, the noise from everyone else couldn't reach them. At least, not for a little while. Night fell heavy over the city, like a thick, damp blanket. The lights from the cars went by far from Lúcia and João, who were crouched near a park bench, hidden from the biting wind and trying to fend off the cold with an old blanket someone had given them 2 days before. The sound of the rain hitting the tarp of their makeshift tent became almost a mantra. For a moment, it seemed like everything out there had disappeared, like no one existed but the 2 small siblings. João slept curled up against his sister's chest, breathing tiny baby breaths, his face tucked in the fold of Lúcia's shirt, which was wet to her waist. She squeezed the little star pendant in her closed hand. It was just a small piece of metal, worn at the edges, but it held all the value and memories of a broken family. For her, that was courage. Only, deep down, Lúcia didn't feel brave. She felt afraid, a tightness in her belly that never let go. She just closed her eyes, trying to convince herself that, this time, no one would notice them in that dark corner. But sleep didn't come easy. Now and then, she heard distant voices, hurried footsteps cutting across the square. She kept looking around the whole time, just like a frightened bird. Suddenly, she sensed someone close. At first, it was just a whisper, a sound that didn't belong to the rain. Then, a branch snapped too close by. Lúcia's heart jumped. She looked around, clutching her brother tighter. The fear rose like a wave of ice up her spine. Someone appeared at the edge of the shadows, a tall silhouette, face hidden by a dark cap. He seemed like he was just passing by, but he didn't turn away. He just stood there, staring straight at her. Hey, little girl, it's late, don't you think? Where's your dad? The man's voice pretended to be sweet, but Lúcia heard the poison underneath, just like when the barman used to toss scraps on the floor for her to pick up, just for the fun of watching her. She wanted to scream, but her throat seized up. João stirred in her lap, sensing the heavy air, and whimpered. The stranger crouched in front of them, glanced around quick, and lowered his voice. You don't have to be scared. Come with me, just for a second. Your friend, that rich man, he's looking for you. Lúcia shook her head, determined, pretending she didn't know a thing. When she tried to stand, the man grabbed her arm. His touch was cold, too tight. The world shrank, just like that alley once, when someone tried to snatch her mother's bag. Only now, it was just her and João. The man kept talking, softly. Come on, girl. This won't hurt. The man just wants to talk. But Lúcia knew there was nothing good in that. She remembered overheard conversations in the mansion's hallway. People saying she was just a burden, someone to squeeze something out of. Mister, I don't want to. My brother's sick, she tried, timid, almost whispering, holding on to João with one arm while she pulled out the pendant with the other. The man pulled harder. João broke out crying, loud, terrified. That split second was all Lúcia needed. She kicked the ground with all her strength, dropped the bag, and ran with João clinging to her chest, stumbling over the cobblestones, feeling the man's hand almost latch onto her hood. Time turned thick and heavy. She bolted through the rain, hearing footsteps chasing her. The cold was even worse now, slicing deep down her spine, cutting her face. All Lúcia could think was, don't let anyone take João from me. Her mother had promised, even sick, that they would stay together. Even with no one, even if the whole world didn't want them. She turned corner after corner, darted into an empty market, and hid behind a cardboard box. The place smelled like rotting fruit and wet floors. The man glanced through the door, cursed under his breath. The rain picked up, muffling every sound. After a few minutes, he left. Only then did Lúcia manage to breathe. Her body shook. The tears came, silent, like water seeping slowly from a cracked glass. She hugged João with all her might. The baby, scared, grabbed her finger with his tiny hand, and she realized then just how much she had to be strong for him. It had never occurred to Lúcia that being noticed by grown-ups, by the rich, could bring this kind of danger. She'd always thought the worst had already happened, losing her mother, being left alone in the world with João. Now she saw, the harm kept circling different ways, different faces. Shame washed over her. How could she, even for one moment, have believed someone like her could ever fit in that big house, within those spotless walls, among those neatly dressed people with glacial eyes? For a second she thought she could rest, but she saw it clearly. There's no rest for those born on the wrong side of the gate. She told herself not to cry aloud, swallowed her sobs, because she didn't want to wake João. His face, sweaty and rain-soaked, pressed to her chest again, looked so innocent, so oblivious to the fear she carried. She heard a dog barking far away, cars honking too fast, people laughing loudly across the street, not even glancing to this side. The silence back behind that box was made of fear, of gnawing hunger. The cold seemed to mock them, sneaking through the ripped blanket. Inside, Lúcia thought the world might never give the two of them peace. Every time they tried to take a step up, someone would shove them back down. And the pendant, which had been hope, now weighed too much. Maybe her mother's promise wasn't really for her. Maybe this was always how it would be. Running, hiding, protecting João, hoping no one would see they existed. But then she felt the baby start to breathe easier, and even though she was terrified, she stroked his hair as gently as her mother used to. She hummed a lullaby meant only for him. The rain didn't let up, but deep inside, she wished for just a little peace. Just a chance to breathe without worrying that shadow would come back. The cold that night felt endless. Lúcia wandered aimlessly, carrying João wrapped in a thin hoodie, trying to shield him from the drizzle. Her arm ached, but she refused to let go. He whimpered now and then, wearier than before. The street, already hostile, felt worse lately. After all the trouble, idle talk about the girl with the jewel, they'd been thrown out of the makeshift shelter, a warm place had become a threat, and threat turned to darkness again. That first night they curled up between two buildings. It was a cramped, damp space. Lúcia pressed her brother to her chest, feeling his cold cheek glued to her wet t-shirt. The pendant, cold against her skin, felt like a shock. She closed her eyes, tried to distract herself by thinking of her mother, but all she could hear was the wind whistling, someone laughing across the street, hurried footsteps from a man who didn't even look in their direction. She wondered if anyone would ever really see them. She tried to nap, but João's crying started again. He wanted milk. It was all he knew how to ask for. Milk, warmth, an embrace. She touched her forehead to his, whispered, "Hush now, little brother, it'll pass soon." But even she doubted it. Her own belly ached with hunger. She thought of crying for help, But fear overpowered her. She remembered the men who had tried to grab her and Joelle. Lucia just wanted to disappear. The street smelled of trash, rain, old cigarettes. Her back was soaked from the cold ground. When the rain worsened, Lucia curled up even tighter, shielding Joelle the best she could, almost completely over him. She wanted to cry out loud, but lacked the strength. Looking at the pendant, she tried, somehow, to feel her mother's presence. She imagined hearing those words again, almost a song, "Don't give up, don't give up." The second night, everything felt worse. People whispered as she passed. Folks with cell phones and nice clothes avoided her eye. A woman, hurrying under an umbrella, even stopped to glance at the baby but then rushed off, swallowed by the restaurant lights. Lucia choked down her tears, legs buckling. She tried to ask for old bread at the market. No one would listen. "Get out, girl. This isn't the place for you." Those words hurt more than the hunger. She was pushed out the door, her stomach twisting with fear and anger. Joelle didn't even cry anymore, only making those hoarse little moans, soaking her shirt with drool and hot breath. When night fell again, Lucia found, almost by miracle, a dry cardboard box near a shuttered kiosk. She sheltered there with Joelle. The street was cold, but inside, it felt like time didn't exist. She slumped back, stared up at a starless sky. "Mom, you didn't forget us, did you?" There was no answer. Just the wind, slicing through. She felt Joelle's hand, still warm, curling around her finger by accident. It was the only certainty left. She thought of her tour of the man who knew about the pendant. She wondered if he remembered his promise about the test, about milk, about everything. She wondered if it meant anything to him, or if everyone up in their world would just keep living as if nothing had happened. She wanted to believe, but it was getting too hard. Pain was stamped on her face. Lucia rubbed her eyes, fighting off sleep, but fear was bigger. Every so often, her hand brushed the pendant, just to be sure something was still shining, even if it was only that. Memories of her mother resurfaced strong, saying, "Be brave, daughter," in that calming voice. The last time she smiled, pressing the pendant into her palm. "Trust, because one day only you will understand its value." Lucia didn't know if the value was money or longing, but right then, it was just lasting one more day. When Joelle finally fell asleep in her arms, breathing heavy, she almost drifted off, too. But she couldn't. Every footstep had her on edge. A man passed by slowly and shot her a dirty glare. He muttered, "Trash." Lucia lowered her head. The fear growing inside her was of vanishing for good, of no one ever searching. The cold wouldn't let up. The girl whispered softly, only for her brother, more for herself. "Just one more day, just hold on one more day." Her chest burned with hunger and loneliness. But somewhere, hope flickered. She blamed herself for believing, but to her, it was that or giving up. She pictured Artur's face when he saw the pendant. Maybe it meant something, even if everyone else said otherwise. She hugged Joe out of her chest, feeling the tears stuck inside threatening to spill out. But she wouldn't let them. "Don't give up," she thought, trying to hear her mother. The sky was starting to lighten, the city waking up. People rushing by, car horns blaring. Lucia couldn't even stand up. All she saw were hurried feet, distant voices, and she stayed right there, trying to stay invisible until someone finally saw her. Until someone finally called her name. In that icy silence, Lucia sensed it wasn't over yet. In some small way, her mother's voice was still inside her. The warmth of the pendant. And Joelle, breathing slow in her lap. Every endless night was just another waiting. Another promise that one day, just by not giving up, things would change. The envelope sat on the table. Just a single sheet of paper, but it weighed as much as the world. It was early, the light still gray through the huge office window, and Artur had barely slept, eyes swollen from overthinking. He stared at his own hands, couldn't still the tremor. Who would have thought that a man who managed empires, who knew everything, could be scared silly just to open an envelope? But inside was everything. The future. An answer that might give meaning or crush all hope for good. He gripped the sheet between his fingers, feeling every fiber. He exhaled. Short, fractured breaths. He remembered the first time he saw the girl, cold cutting through that stormy night, the baby curled in her arms. And the pendant, that little star, tarnished yet shining in the midst of street grime. For some reason, that piece never left his thoughts. Down the hall, Lucia sat on a wooden bench, João asleep in her arms. She rocked him gently, her big eyes glued to the office door. She was 7, but seemed even smaller, her shoulders hunched, the look of someone who'd waited so long she'd forgotten how to expect something good. She said nothing, just held her brother's hand and kept quiet. Inside, She kept repeating her mother's message, the only one she ever held on to, even when hunger gnawed or the wind cut like a knife. Don't give up. Worse than fear today was not knowing where she came from. They'd been thrown out again, spent another night against the cold store wall, sharing a nearly eyeless stuffed animal, just waiting for dawn. The silence in the office hurt. All you could hear was the sterile tick of the clock, counting each second. Artur tried to breathe deep. He thought of all he'd lost, and how he'd been cold his entire life just to keep pain out. But pain always found a way in. His fingers pulled out the paper. Words, cold and clinical. But his eyes went straight to the part that mattered. Result, compatible. Genetic paternity link, positive, 99.9%. The air escaped him, almost a sob. Artur put a hand to his mouth, eyes damp. It wasn't the kind of movie cry, loud and dramatic. It was silent, the kind from a man who learned rich men don't cry, but who just couldn't hold back anymore. His pen clattered to the table and he sank back in his chair. For long seconds, he only stared at the paper. He remembered Lucia's mother's face, the sad smile, always protective. He never expected to find a piece of her again. And now guilt settled in, bitter, as if all those years had been stolen without knowing. He wondered, how many nights has that girl shivered with cold while I believed my life was safe? What would have changed if I'd searched harder? Clutching the paper so hard it nearly tore, he got up in a rush. Out in the hall, the door flew open and startled Lucia. The doctor looked on, started to say something, but Artur walked straight past. He stumbled on the carpet, almost breaking into a run. He saw the girl curled up protectively, baby in her lap, and stopped. His heart hammered. Lucia stared wide-eyed, not understanding. Of course she remembered him. Well-dressed man, always serious, always with that air of someone who didn't care about others. Slowly, she lifted her face. And Artur, not even sure what he was doing, broke down. He dropped to his knees in front of her, eyes brimming. The suit, always so perfect, was now rumpled, stained with tears. Down the hall, a nurse stopped, curious. But no one spoke. Artur reached his hand toward her face, not quite touching, just close. He looked into those eyes, so sad. It was as if, looking at her, he saw the woman he once loved, and at the same time, everything he'd lost in those years of silence. He whispered, his voice shaking. Are you my daughter? Lucia didn't answer right away. She frowned, gaze lost between him and the sheet he was holding. She saw letters, numbers, all a blur. No one had ever knelt to her like this. No one had ever cried at the sight of her face. For a second, she was afraid it was just another bad dream, like when dawn cold woke her up. Slowly, he raised the paper. His hand shook. But it wasn't the words that made Lucia understand. It was the way he looked at her, like he'd discovered something ancient and priceless, as if he wanted to beg forgiveness for all the lost time. For a heartbeat, it was as if life itself held its breath. Silence hung heavy in the corridor. Even Joao, on her lap, slowly woke and stared at the scene, with the pure eyes of someone who knows nothing yet about sadness or joy. All he felt was the warmth of his sister. And then Artur did what he'd never imagined. He opened his arms, hesitant. He didn't force it, only offered. Lucia waited a moment, as if to test if it was safe. Then, a little sideways, she slid into his hug. He held them both, the skinny girl, the crying baby, and squeezed like he'd never let go. And in that moment, there were no suits, no money, no fear, no pride. Only tears. And between sobs, he begged softly in her ear, I'm sorry. Please, I'm so sorry for everything. I'll never let you be alone again. Lucia felt her chest ache. But it was a different pain, a good one. As if her mother was smiling inside her again. When the baby started crying, Artur only held them tighter. And there, sitting on the cold hospital floor, a powerful man, a street girl, and a baby, no one could take away their certainty. They weren't invisible anymore. You could tell, just by looking at the house, that this was no ordinary day. The mansion's walls looked colder, and the silence bit sharper than the chill outside, along the streets where Lucia had always walked. It was a loaded silence, suffocating, the kind you feel when everyone inside is waiting for the worst. Artur had barely stepped into the grand living room, with shining chandeliers and more carpet than Lucia had ever seen cover all the houses together, before he felt every pair of eyes land on him. Family, uncles, cousins, lawyers in crisp suits, nosy neighbors, Even a few servants in the corner, half afraid to show they cared. All that was missing was rain inside, because outside the storm was doing its job, battering the huge windows. Lucia was there, hand in Artur's, holding Joao in her other arm, already feeling the tension in every breath. You could read the worry in her eyes, pale face, parched lips. Artur did not let go, gripping her hand as if promising nothing would happen to her. But she knew these crowds well. People who never notice invisible kids on the street, but get bothered when one shows up where they're not wanted. Mr. Antonio, Artur's oldest brother, was the first to raise his voice. He spoke as if he owned authority, chest puffed out, finger wagging. Are you out of your mind? You're really going to throw away our name like this? The venom in his voice was obvious. Even Joao, tucked in Lucia's arms, threatened to cry. Before anyone else could start blaming, Artur took a breath and pulled Lucia closer. His hand shook. He looked everyone in the eye, one by one, sometimes lingering on an uncle, on one of the lawyers, or a family member. His face was a war of tears, rage, and fear, but he was determined. Courage rising in the middle of grief, blooming inside stronger than ever. She's my daughter, and if anyone here can't accept it, you'll just have to learn. He didn't shout, but his voice came out steady, louder than any thunder. The silence swelled, if that was even possible. Lucia stared down, clutching the star pendant against her chest, just as she used to do when fear hit in the heart of the city, trying to hide from hunger or people's indifference. But now the fear was different. The fear was of being rejected, of someone taking away the little she'd just found. Artur went on. She's a Montenegro. Only those without hearts ignore a child who's hungry, who's alone. My daughter is never leaving again. Neither is her brother. Let everyone know they're my only heirs. If you want to fight, fight me, not them. And that's when Artur did something Lucia never imagined seeing. He knelt in front of her, in front of everyone, hugged the two of them right there, as tight as if protecting them from all harm. You could see the shock ripple through the faces in the room. The uncles glancing at each other, whispering about scandal, about the inheritance going to waste, hissing the way adults do when all they care about is money. One of the younger cousins looked at Lucia with pity, but also that curious way children do, as if spotting some forbidden animal where it didn't belong. Lucia breathed quickly, but all at once, she felt something completely new. She was in the center. She wasn't invisible anymore. Everyone saw her, not all approving, but saw her. Her chest fluttered with fear and pride together. It was as if she stood at the edge of a cliff and someone decided to grab her hand before she fell. She looked up at Artur, a man in expensive clothes, tired face, but eyes shining with emotion. He didn't even try to stop the tears running down his face. He wiped them quickly, but didn't pretend he didn't feel. And she, while holding her brother tight, squeezed her father's arm too, wanting to hold on to that feeling, not of wealth, but of belonging. Joao, in her arms, stared at it all wide-eyed, cheeks flushed, nervously sucking his fingers. When a loud thunderclap hit, he cried, and his wails echoed through the room. But this time, someone stepped up to help. Maria, the longtime cook, crossed through all the suspicious gazes, took Joao gently, and told him softly not to be scared, that now everything would be all right. On the other side, some voices started rising, angry people talking lawsuits, declaring they'd fight for the inheritance, that they refused to have a past of poverty under their roof. But Artur just repeated, this time in a calm, low voice, almost in Lucia's ear, we're staying. Let them learn, daughter. Lucia closed her eyes for a heartbeat. She saw her mother in her mind, holding her hand on cold street nights, saying that Pendant would change everything. And it did, she thought. But not for the gold, not for the luxury. It made everyone look, made her exist. She was there, seen, felt, loved. Deep down, no one in that grand living room had ever truly starved. No one there knew what it was to fall asleep with rain battering the sidewalk, rocking your brother in your arms, trying to be invisible to everyone. Only her. Maybe for that reason alone, she kept her head up, even with her voice wobbly from holding back tears. People didn't want to accept it, but Lucia stayed. She felt proud for having survived so much. She was scared of what would come, but for the first time, fear made room for a new kind of courage, growing beside the warmth of, finally, not being alone. Artur still hugged Lucia and Joao, his whole body saying, "They can say what they want. No one is tearing us apart." And everyone saw it. Everyone heard it. There was no turning back. The door to the mansion closed gently behind them, shutting out the sound of the rain still falling outside. The cold wind was left beyond the walls, and within, all that remained was that strange, heavy hush echoing between tall walls lined with old portraits staring down from above. But this time, inside that silence, there was no threat. There was a new warmth, a spark of hope, and a bit of fear too, because everything was so new, and it had hurt so much just to imagine having a home. Lucia fumbled to kick off her shoes, looking around as though anything in that house might vanish if she wasn't careful. She didn't know if she could touch anything or speak above a whisper. She stood still, feeling Joao's weight in her arms, his cold little fingers wrapped around her, just as always. But now, for the first time, she could breathe without fearing someone would shout or tell them to run. Artur didn't seem to know what to do with his hands or feelings either, as he stood beside the children. His face was worn, eyes red, and he swallowed hard watching Lucia take in the room, looking so tiny in that enormous hall. But every now and then, a shy, crooked smile escaped at the corner of his mouth, as if he'd forgotten how to smile, and was just now remembering. Time passed slowly. Lucia turned to look at the staircase, enormous, carpeted, straight out of a movie, but real. She could even smell the fresh clean scent. She and Joao climbed together, her little feet trying to make no noise, until they sat on a broad step with Joao quietly in her lap. There, her brother's cries no longer pierced the street. There was no need to hush him or rush so nobody would get annoyed. Joao just looked up at his sister, blinking slowly, and she realized, no one will ever take him from my arms again. Here, he'll sleep warm. Artur followed and sat down too, adjusting his tie with the awkwardness of someone not used to so much silent company. The three of them stayed there together, half side by side, half unsure of themselves. No one knew what the right move was now. They just felt this strange thing, a new and peculiar peace. The house was full of shadows, only one lamp on, casting a yellow light that made everything feel calmer. Through the window glass, you could see the rain trickling down, warm, washing away bad memories outside. Lucia kept thinking of the smell of clean sheets, the soft rug beneath her feet, and wondered if she'd ever truly believe that any of this was real. Her stomach still ached, as if it didn't understand that the fear was finally leaving. But for the first time since she remembered her mother giving her the pendant, she didn't feel invisible. Artur looked at her with warm eyes, shining with pride and surprise, like someone who's just found something he'd spent his life believing didn't exist. He didn't say much. He gently ran his hand through her hair, a little clumsy. He murmured, "You're safe now, I promise," softly. Lucia didn't answer, just watched his fingers, the tenderness in them, unable to let go of her brother or stop trembling inside. It wasn't from the cold anymore. It was fear of losing this again, fear of waking up and being back on the street. The baby fell asleep first, his little head resting on her shoulder, breathing heavy, worn out from all the struggle. Lucia slowly pulled the blanket up over Joao. In the silence, she listened to his steady breathing, felt his warmth against her arm. It was a good silence, a silence with no threat in it. For the first time, she was able to really look at Artur. His eyes were full, shining with tears he wouldn't let fall. The hard face of the wealthy man seemed to collapse every time he looked at the children. No trace of arrogance, just human, just together. He wiped his brow, took a deep breath, ran his fingers over his face, and, for the first time since the tragedy, looked like he wasn't alone anymore in that big house full of portraits. Suddenly, Lucia felt like smiling. It had been so long she couldn't recall the feeling. She allowed herself a small smile, just for herself. There wasn't food everywhere or luxury enough to wipe away fear so quickly, but there was an embrace. This time, she let herself rest her head on her father's arm and closed her eyes very slowly. Artur straightened the blazer slipping from her shoulders, gave her a father's awkward, gentle touch, slow, like someone who knows caring takes time. He stood there, feeling the weight of that child, listening to the sound of rain outside, and sometimes closed his eyes to keep from crying. He wanted to promise them the world, wanted to beg God's forgiveness for every night the kids had spent out in the cold. But words failed him. So he just stood there, holding on, the hug growing tighter. The night was long and calm. Lucia fell asleep right there on the stairs. Then Artur carried them both, tiny Joao and Lucia, so light, up to their new room. The mattress was soft. There was a real pillow, the scent of soap, and warm covers that she burrowed into beside her brother. Before she closed her eyes, she looked up at the ceiling. She thought about her mother, about the pendant gleaming shyly at her throat, about Artur's hand holding hers so gently. Now, all she needed was to sleep. Just that, to sleep, afraid of nothing, next to her brother and her father, sure that this time, no one would take that peace away from her. The day broke gray, but the bone-cutting cold was gone. It just felt like the crisp nerves before something important was going to happen. Lucia stood still a moment, gazing out the big window, watching the clouds gather and thinking of her mother. She wished her mother could see all of it. It couldn't be a dream. Joao was already awake, wrapped in the blue blanket, giggling quietly at his new toys. Artur came in behind, looking shy, gripping his jacket as if he needed courage. He didn't, not really, but he hadn't learned that yet. The project's hall was finished the night before. It still smelled of fresh paint and of warm bread wafting in from the kitchen. On the walls, big photos of the families they'd help. In one corner, the star-shaped pendant shining, hanging inside a glass frame. A tribute, a way to remember. At the entrance, people were arriving from all over. Little old ladies alone, children in simple clothes, some men in suits, cautious looks mixed with hope. And for the first time in ages, no one looked away from Lucia. No one pretended she wasn't there. She stood next to the makeshift stage, feeling her heart thudding high in her throat. The dress, a simple, new one, but nothing like the rags she used to wear, felt almost too heavy for her. Joao nursed quietly in her arms, nestling his head where her heart beat the loudest, and she ran her hands softly through his hair just to soothe herself. Artur moved around the hall, smiling in that clumsy but genuine way. Every so often, he'd stop and look at Lucia and Joao in silence, his eyes shining with hidden tears. Nobody noticed, but he felt the weight of every day he hadn't known, hadn't searched, hadn't done anything, until that night in the rain. He tried to smile, but sometimes his hand shook, and he'd clutch the pocket where he kept his daughter's old photo, marked by the fire. The moment for the speech came, and Lucia didn't know what to say. She didn't want to speak to anyone, just to her mother, like they used to, every night, looking up at the sky. But now everyone was listening. She pressed her lips to the microphone, saw the bright stage lights, and all the eyes in the hall. Her voice came out small and choked, at first. One day, we thought it was all over. When Mommy left, we were alone. I thought no one would ever see us again. But Mommy said, she said this star, she touched the pendant, lifting it for everyone to see, would change everything. I didn't understand it then, but she was right. Her voice trembled. Joao started fussing, wanting to be held. Artur stepped forward, crouched down to their level, and stayed by her side, looking at Lucia like he was witnessing a miracle. The whole room already shimmered with tears. There are so many people who are cold, hungry, afraid. So many children who just want a hug, a bed, some bread. I thought I didn't deserve any of that. But now we're going to help bring hope to people who've lost it. This place is for anyone who needs to be seen, heard, truly embraced. She finished, nearly out of breath, feeling a warm flush in her cheeks. Silence filled the room. No one seemed to know what to do. Even Joao, as if he understood, let out a happy little cry, reaching out his tiny hand. That was when Artur pulled Lucia and Joao into a tight embrace, holding them as if afraid to let go. He wept openly, unable to stop, his face buried on Lucia's shoulder. The crowd wept with him, no one hiding it. There were old ladies dabbing at their eyes, business people trying not to sniffle. In that embrace, time seemed to pause. It wasn't just a new family being born. It was a debt repaid, a longing welcomed home, a promise kept for the woman who'd left too soon. Artur breathed in the scent of kid shampoo, the warmth of those small, skinny bodies, and realized that real strength was being able to care. Afterward, they walked together around the hall, greeting the families. Lucia saw younger children, alone, just as she'd once been, and took the hand of a little girl in a worn-out dress. Joao smiled at an old lady trembling with nerves, and she cried a little more. Artur took the microphone and faced the crowd, his voice steadier now. Lucia and Joao's mother taught me everything I needed to know. No one should be invisible. Today, this project begins out of love and justice, but it will only grow if we remember that every single day. The applause rang out loud. But what lingered was that embrace, that feeling that, for once, hope was more than just a pretty word. It was real. It was arms around you, true warmth. There, at the heart of that hall, a new beginning was born, not just for them, but for everyone who, at some point, had been a Lucia or a Joao in this vast, cold world.